15,400 downloads. That is what my podcast is sitting at as of the recording of this video. 3 years and 4 months after I hit record on episode number 1, and today actually happens to be my birthday. So I've been thinking all week about the version of me who started this podcast and what I would go back and tell her if I could. So if you have a podcast that is not growing the way that you hoped, or if you've been thinking about starting a podcast and you're waiting to feel ready, the 5 things that I'm about to share with you right now is exactly what I would tell her. And it's exactly what I want to tell you, especially number 4, because most podcasters skip this part and they pay for it later. And I'm actually in that group of people. I am actually paying for it right now because I had no systems in place. So quick context. When I started my podcast, which is called Moms Who Podcast, if you haven't already, go check it out, go follow the podcast wherever you're listening. But when I started my podcast in January of 2023, I was recording in whatever I had on. My son had just turned 2. I was using a $70 microphone that my husband bought me, and I had no idea if anyone would listen. Also, another quick context, this was actually my second podcast because my first podcast I launched in order to get web design clients, and that actually succeeded very well. But I was obsessed with podcasting. And so I launched Moms Who Podcast in January of 2023. And I had no idea if anyone would listen. I knew that it was very niche what I was doing. And so year number 1 with podcasting ended at over 2,000 downloads. I'm going to put it here on the screen so you can see exactly what that number is. And combining that with year 1, year 2 ended at just over 7,000 downloads. And so now we are in 2026. We are 4 months into year 3. And now the show is sitting at 15,400 downloads as of this morning. And so it has doubled and then doubled again. And here is what I learned about why my podcast has doubled in numbers every single year. Number 1, hands down, is collaborations. Collaborations are the fastest way to grow your podcast, period. Don't let anybody tell you any different. Unless you are some absolutely massive celebrity, that is the best way that you are going to grow your show, period. The single biggest jump in my numbers ever came after I hosted my very own summit in January of 2025. And here is the wild part, is that I've only hosted that summit one time, right? Because a summit actually takes a lot of planning and a lot of strategy. And so I have not been able to physically host another virtual summit because it was so much. And even though that was over a year ago, people are still telling me that they found me through my summit. Almost every call that I get on, I like to ask how people found me. And most of the time, their answer is some version of they found me from a summit or a bundle. Now, I'm not telling you to host a summit because that's a lot of work. But what I will say is that hosting your own summit in alignment with your podcast is chef's kiss, a magical recipe for beautiful growth for not only your podcast, but for your business as well. But collaboration as a whole is what moves the whole needle. And here are 3 real ways to do it. Number 1, of course, is like I said, to host your own virtual event. But if that feels like too much, you can also be a part of somebody else's event. You can also have guests on your own show, but a quick note about having guests on your show, or also about being on other people's show as a guest, you should be intentional. I see people on threads every day asking who wants them to be on their podcast, and the answer is not saying yes to everyone who fits the genre, okay? Alignment matters more than somebody's availability to be on your podcast. So if your show is about helping other moms with their newborns and their sleep habits, you probably shouldn't have an email marketing expert on your podcast to talk about their business, right? You shouldn't have somebody coming on to talk about their morning routine or a meal prep tip, right? It should be aligned to the work that your podcast is actually doing and also aligned to your business, right? And here is the part that most people forget. Every collaboration is evergreen. Every guest spot, every summit talk, every bundle pitch, it all pays off for years. Lesson number 2 is getting clear on who your dream listener is before you hit record. I started my podcast knowing that I wanted to help mom entrepreneurs with their podcast. And at the time, that felt specific enough. And it kind of was, but it also wasn't. So the lesson here is that mom entrepreneurs with the podcast is not a person. That is a category. The person is a specific woman with a specific business in a specific season of life with a specific quiet thought that she keeps having at 2 a.m. And the more specific that you get, the more that your podcast episodes are going to land. The more you try to talk to everyone, the more that your content lands with no one. And I want you to think about it. I want you to think when you find a podcast that feels made for you, or when you find somebody on YouTube that you feel completely aligned with, you binge their content. When you find one that feels made for everyone, you bounce. I know that I do. And it's the same with email. It's the same with everything. So if I could go back, I would have spent more time sitting with that one person, her name, her schedule, her fears, her quiet 2 a.m. Google searches. Because every episode that I record now, every YouTube video that I record now is so much more powerful, not because I got better at the microphone, even though yes, every time I show up, I gain more of this skill set of speaking, but because I actually know who the heck I'm talking to. Lesson number 3 is that every single episode that you record, it has to have a job. I wish I would have had this hammered into my brain from day one. But when I started, I would just sit down and literally talk about whatever I had been thinking about that week or whatever topic, came to mind. And here's what I learned about that. Every single episode is doing work for your business, whether you designed it to or not. So the question is whether the episode is actually doing the work that you want it to do. An episode with a real job, it knows 4 things. It knows, number 1, who it's for. Number 2, what it teaches or what shifts for the person listening. Number 3, what offer it actually connects to. And number 4, what the one next step is for the listener after they're done listening. An episode without that structure is literally just you talking, which is fine for a hobby. But if you're watching this video and if you've listened to my podcast at all, I know that you don't have a hobby podcast. You have a business asset. Your podcast is not a memoir. It is a marketing asset. And the version of you who knows what each episode is for is the version of you who's actually building something meaningful that's going to support your business. Lesson number 4, and this is the one that I'm going to shout from the rooftops forever. It is auditing your show is not optional. It is required. Here's exactly what I mean. So when I was actually preparing this YouTube video and I actually recorded a very similar podcast episode that went along with this, and I digress just a little bit, but I'm also auditing my own podcast as we speak. And so what I did when I was recording the podcast episode is I went in and I opened up my own show notes. And I'm actually going to do it right here so I can show you here in this YouTube video. But I opened up the very first episode of my podcast and I found 4 broken links out of 8. 4 page not found errors. Retired freebies, absolutely dead. Pages that don't exist anymore. From an episode that is still published, that still gets downloads and still gets plays. It is still bringing new listeners in. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so here is my podcast, Moms Who Podcast. And so you can't tell how many episodes I have right now, but if I scroll all the way down, you'll see that I have 171 episodes. I actually have 164. And so as I'm auditing my podcast, I'm going to figure out why this number is so high because there's actually like episodes inside of my podcast host that are hidden. And I think that contributes to this number being so high. But you can tell that I have a lot of episodes, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go down here and I'm going to click on See All 172 and I'm going to go all the way to the very first episode and we are going to take a look. So when I click on this very first episode, this makes me cringe so very hard. But first of all, I don't write my show notes like this anymore. And then there's so many links here. And so what happens when there's a lot of links in your show notes is it creates friction, meaning that if there's too many options, people are just going to bounce, right? If they have to think about where they should be clicking, they're not going to make any decision whatsoever. And so we really need to simplify this. And so let's actually go through each and every one of these and see what happens when I click on them. So the first link here says, click here to grab a free podcast clarity call. Spots are limited. So I do have this as an offer. I still offer podcast clarity calls. However, it's not something that I advertise on the podcast and it's not a call to action that is a part of the actions that I want people to take when they're listening to my podcast. So if I click this link right here, it says, whoops, this page was not found. I don't even have this as my calendar anymore. So the link would need updated because it's a broken link. So if we go back to the show notes and if I click here to get organized with your podcast and grab your free ultimate podcast organizer. So this is technically a retired freebie, but it kind of got brought back to life, but I don't yet have the new link for it even. So this is basically not even active anymore. And so if I click here, it's literally taking me to, oops, this page isn't available. Looking for my podcast services, explore my website. And if I go back to my show notes, click here for my favorite business and podcast tools. Now, I know that this has not changed. So at least all my favorite stuff is here, but I do need to fix it because look at this. This is all messed up. So I need to go in and fix all of that. But at least the page works. So there's a plus on that. So if I go back to my show notes, now it says join the community. It says click here to join other moms who podcast inside the paid community. Well, as of this recording, I don't have a paid community, but stay tuned because a paid community is actually coming. But as of right now, if I click this button, it's going to go to a broken page on my website again. So if I go back to the show notes, now it says click here to join other moms who podcast inside of the free community. If I click here, that does go to my Facebook page, and this is still an active group, sort of, kind of, not really, but I actually direct all my traffic to my school community, and that link is nowhere to be found here. And so now we have Let's Work Together, ready to launch your podcast. If I click here, that does go to the proper page, so yay for that. And then if I go back to my show notes and I click want me to edit, upload, and schedule your show, that does take me to my podcast management page on my website. So out of these links, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 links that are either broken or that need changed and fixed out of like 8 links. And then that's not even including these links. So in total, I think I have 12. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 links, but 12 if you count this one, which this is actually a dynamic ad in Captivate for my upcoming workshop. So this doesn't count because this is not technically a part of the show notes for this episode. So that episode is still bringing listeners in, and it's still somebody's first impression of me. So if you have a podcast, I want you to think about this for your own show. And if you don't have one yet, I want you to think about it for your future show because your podcast back catalog is a true asset. But the moment that you stop maintaining it, every episode quietly downgrades from a working asset, and it just will not work for your business. Every single month that passes is another month of warm leads finding broken doors at the end of your old episodes. Auditing your podcast, what I've come to find is truly maintenance. It's like getting your car serviced or getting your teeth cleaned, which by the way, I need to make my dentist appointment today, but you do not get to skip it. Not if you want your podcast to actually work for your business. And the worst part of telling yourself that you'll get to it eventually is that you never catch up because the next episode is always already there or upcoming. So if you're hearing this and you know that you have a bunch of episodes under your belt, this is your sign that doing an audit on your podcast is not optional. And I made it easy for you to start. I actually built a free tool called the Podcast to Clients tool over at podcasttoclients.com. It's going to walk you through diagnosing your own podcast for exactly what I just described. No starting over, just a clear look at where your show could be attracting those warm leads who could eventually turn into clients. The link is in the description. Go take it right after this video. Number 5 is don't wait to feel ready. I want to say this to the woman watching, or maybe the guy watching, because I feel like some guys are watching my channel now, but I want to say this to you who's been thinking about starting a podcast and you just can't seem to hit record, or maybe you have a podcast and you took a break, or maybe it just feels really heavy right now. But when I started my podcast in 2022, I didn't want to put makeup on. I didn't want to brush my hair. I didn't want to wear real clothes. My son was 2, plus I have 4 older girls, plus a business that I was trying to grow. And the version of podcasting that I pictured in my head, the influencer version with the studio and the sponsors, that wasn't happening. So I literally just started with what I had. And that one decision is what built every single number that I just told you. The 15,400 downloads, the clients, the community, the business, all of it started because I chose to start. You are never going to feel ready. The gear will never be quite right. You're always going to want the latest gear. You're always going to want something else. Your hair will never be perfect. You're never, ever going to know enough. And every week that you wait is a week of clients who can't find you because you haven't given them the door yet. And done is better than perfect. Started is better than someday. So if I could go back and tell my younger self one thing that ties all 5 of these things together, it's this. Podcasting is not about going viral. It is about getting really deep. The downloads, they compound on top of each other. The trust also compounds, the business compounds, and the woman who shows up week after week, who knows who she's talking to, who treats every single episode like it has a job, who audits her podcast before it gets really bad, and who hits record before she feels ready, that's the woman who is building something really real and really true over time to support her business and her family. So here's your next step. If you already have a podcast and any part of you went, oof, during this, you need to go take my Podcast to Clients tool at podcasttoclients.com. It's free. The link is in the description. It's going to show you exactly where your show can get you those warm leads and clients. Do that before another month goes by, please. And if you want me to teach this framework for getting clients from your podcast using the old episodes that you already have, I do have an upcoming workshop called How to Get Clients from Your Old Podcast Episodes. The registration link for that is in the description as well. And if you're watching this video and you haven't started your podcast yet, go ahead and go to mypodcastlaunchplan.com. It's going to ask you 3 questions. It's going to ask you who your audience is, what you're selling, and what the transformation is that your clients get. And it's going to give you a plan so that you can see the shape of what your show would be. So go to mypodcastlaunchplan.com. I'm also going to put that in the show notes. And then no matter if you have a podcast or if you don't, come hang out with us over in the free Moms Who Podcast community over on School. You can go to school.com/podcasters. And if you loved this video, I know that you're really going to love this one. So go ahead and watch it right now, and I will see you in that video.